Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today, as you can see, we're talking about the Omega Code. We're going to be going over all of the different 5 stars currently in the game, but also something very important you need to know at the end of the video about the Omega Code and my thoughts on what you should be doing with this thing. What 5-star character manifest ego should we be thinking about unlocking, and which ones are the most game-changing for you, for your account? What are you going to have fun with, and what can you do with it? The easiest thing for you to do is support the channel by checking out the link in the description below. You're going to get a free legendary champion as well as up to $200 worth of free goodies. And don't forget, up to 3 awesome epics as you level up inside of Raid. And be sure to use the code Desert Queen to get access to your new free legendary champion in the form of Tahana Rock. As always, this helps the channel out so much, guys, so be sure to check that description down in the link below and join me in Raid today. Now, let's start off with Luke. Luke's manifest egos are actually some of the biggest ones you can have access to in the game. I do give Luke a little bit of a bad rap, but that's only his E0 version. There's 2 big manifest egos that you get for Luke that if you want to fulfill your Luke power desires, build him in a sort of Cassius based team, something that mimics like a Tressa team or mimics like a Mei Lin Veronica combo team. This is the big ego awakening memory for you. Now this E2, if you lose 3 bullet cards with Luke, you're going to make 2 more handgun bullet cards in your hand. It does decrease the amount of damage that the bullets you generate through the E2 do, but most importantly, not only is it free damage, it also allows him to start pairing up exceptionally well with the likes of Cassius, because these bullets are going to be costing, you know, 0, right? All of his bullets cost 0. They're not like Renoa's that cost 1 and you have to like discard them at the end of the turn. You get to make bullets and they're going to be 0 cost, which is big for a 000 Cassius quest team. Before that, you could pull that off with Luke, but his bullet generation just isn't really there unless you have the E2. So if you're looking to put like some sort of Luke Cassius team together that's been on your radar, E2 is a pretty big one. It does only activate once per turn, but getting that extra generation helps out building that Cassius quest up just a little bit more. The other big one that really takes off in a Cassius combo Luke team as well is going to be the E6. So if you've pulled Luke multiple times and you're 1 away from the E6, you can get liberated memory here, which is going to buff up the damage amount of target analysis by 15%. But each time you use 12 bullet cards, you're going to create an additional super awesome bullet, the high velocity armor piercer. So this thing is going to be just 200 damage and it has guaranteed critical on it. By the time you have his E6 though, your crit rate's already probably going to be pretty high, where you're going to be able to land a crit on this without the guaranteed critical a good majority of the time, at least 50% of the time. But the fact that this guaranteed crits is nice. It is also another 0 cost that you can help generate with Luke to do damage in that regard, and it helps out that team quite a lot. You can pair these 2 things up, and it also helps feed one of his main payoffs, right? Finish around's one of them, but it's really Dance of the Demon, which is a pseudo Cassius quest on its own. Without the extra bullet generation of E2 and E6, I think he gets held back quite a bit. But once you have E2 and once you have E6, he actually does do a good amount of damage, and in the right team, you can cycle through quite a lot and use this epiphany here. 75% damage on Dance of the Demon, but it hits an extra time for every bullet used this turn. So you can think of it like a very mini Mei Lin. Now, with all of that said and done, do I think you should go out and just absolutely grab his E2, absolutely grab his E6? If you don't have Tressa built, the Mika Cassius Tressa team in your squad for some reason, even though Tressa's like a free 4-star that you have on your account guaranteed, or if you don't have access to Mei Lin to pull off the Mei Lin Veronica stuff, a lot of Luke's teams really use a combination of Cassius or Veronica, one of those 2 supports, to pull off a similar function. You can go ahead and feel free to use it there. However, if you have those characters, unless you're like a big Luke fan, I would just use the other 2 teams and just not use your very important 5-star, whoever you want, Memory Manifest Ego Awakener on someone like, but he does have 2 very pivotal ones. Now, Khalipe has a couple good Manifest Egos here as well. She is a very solid all-round character, and I mention that because she is pretty solid both in as well as outside of Chaos. Outside of Chaos, you're not going to see someone like Khalipe right now, anyway, on some sort of infinity, I cycle through my deck, do a bunch of damage team. But her first 2 Manifest Egos are pretty decent. This first one here is simply adding Retain to Absolute Protection, which if you're building a team around Retain, which a lot of people do with like the likes of Barrel plus Khalipe, and then I don't know, maybe like Veronica or a healer or someone, depending on which sort of way you're trying to go. You're trying to go like super fast damage, you're trying to go like a little bit more tank down. That's up to you. But adding Retain to Absolute's Protection is pretty nice. It does help you consistently proc in situations where maybe the only character in your Khalipe team that has 2 or more in it is Khalipe herself. Another way for you to consistently proc celestial cards, because having the Retain effect on it allows you to just save it in your hand for a rainy day, and you don't need to have it in your hand. You drew it that turn at the correct time, at the correct moment, to finally be like, this is the card I need to proc all of my celestials. You can have it sit there as a backup plan. It's not going to get shuffled back into your deck. You're not going to waste draws drawing an Absolute Protection you might not want to use that turn. It's just going to sit there, and it will be a nice backup plan for you. And at the end of the day, it plays pretty nicely with what it is that she wants to do in your party. I don't think it's a broken Manifest Ego, but it's definitely got some nice potential with it. The second one here is simply going to put a Vulture Ejection at the top of your draw pile in every time you shuffle it, which means that you're going to be consistently doing what Khalipe wants to do, which is get EP value off of casting her celestial cards free, either from one of her own 2-cost or more cards or someone else's 2-cost or more cards, because you want to build this team with the intention of casting free Vulture Ejections. So if you can put your E2, right, Khalipe in a team that can draw and cycle a lot of cards, have her just kind of hang out, and then maybe 1 or 2 times per shuffle, you just cast that 2-drop and cast a bunch of Vulture Ejections. You're going to be able to have access to it guaranteed before you draw through the entirety of your deck. Is it busted? Is it broken? No, but it is something that is worth a little bit more than I do 5% more damage, I do 10% more damage. These things don't give you straight up damage percent benefits, they give you consistency benefits, which in a card game is pretty cool. So if you find yourself using Khalipe a lot, those 2 could be pretty big for you there. We also are going to be going into Magna. Her Manifest Egos are going to be, well, pretty similar to what we just talked about for the most part, where it's just, I do my thing, but I kind of do a little bit better. However, she does have some very nice ones as well as 2s. So the first one here is going to give initiation to Storm of Bitter Cold. If you're using Magna, guess what? You're going to be gaining a lot of shields probably in your team. That's what she's there for. You're going to be shielding up, doing this tank down strategy. Having one of the payoffs, which is getting counter every time you apply a shield, guaranteed, because this gives it initiation, helps you in consistency again. So that's a pretty nice benefit. You always are going to be like, every time I load into a battle with my Magna team, I'm going to have a Storm of Bitter Cold. It's going to be there, and I'm ready to rock and roll, throw up shields. I already have counterattack. I know what I'm doing. It's going to be there for me to use, which is pretty nice. The second one here is allowing Magna's counters to inflict a debuff called Freeze, and then when a freezed character takes damage from Magna's attack cards, everyone else is going to take 50% defense-based damage, and then it removes the freeze as well. So if you can counter a bunch and put freeze on multiple people, get to Magna's turn and start casting some of her single target cards, especially something like, I think it's Glacial Iron Fist has a pretty nice epiphany here where it does defense-based damage. You can hit an AoE with multiple single target cards, which is pretty nice in the grand scheme of things. She's got a couple other cards as well that do single target damage, I believe. And this sounds awesome. It's going to allow you to do like AoE damage based off of your counters, but if you pay very close attention to this ego, I wanted to warn you a little bit about it. It only procs off of Magna's attack cards. And if you go and look at her cards, well, she doesn't have a ton of actual straight up attack cards. She's got Glacial Iron Fist, which is a big one here. You can counter, put freeze on people, and then hit them and have it do AoE damage. Although we already have an AoE damage one here. Outside of that, most of her stuff, even through her epiphanies, are skill cards or upgrade cards. You have this one as well, but it's already AoE and it's equivalent to the shield you own. So this one, the E2 on Magna, might look super sick, but a lot of the times you're really not going to be gaining a big benefit off of this E2. Rin is going to be the epitome of I do my thing, but I just do it a little bit better. Her E1 is going to give 20% damage amount increase to Black Dance, which is nice. It's one of her big payoffs if you want to use it. This is just a straight 20% damage increase to one of her better cards, so we don't have that ego, although you're not really gaining a gameplay changing benefit. You're just going to be doing more damage with your damage dealer's best card for the most part a lot of the times, which is nice. The E2, if you're in Dark Moon stance, you gain a Sheath card as well, which is also pretty nice, as this is a nice payoff card as you're able to, in a Rin team, the whole focus, right, is to cycle through your deck with supports and just play as many Rin cards as you can as attacks in that turn. And guess what? This one scales based off of how many attacks you've used with Rin that turn. And getting a free one of these is just going to up your damage by a pretty significant amount. So if you're a Rin main and you just want to get free generation, very similar to something like Luke's E2 or Luke's E6, she has something similar to that, and it's one of the best manifest egos, I think, that you can get damage from, at least damage buff from, for Rin in CZN. I really like that manifest ego. If you go ahead and look at the rest of them though, 50% more damage on E3, right? Gain Dark Mist stance automatically if you're not in Dark Mist stance, which is something that a lot of players I think will look and gravitate to initially. And I'll say two things about this one. This one is probably getting the most benefit when you're using Rin in Chaos, because you don't have all of your decks together right away ready to rock and roll. You're going to have random attack cards from your supports in your deck, and you're going to want to use them every once in a while just to clear out some trash monsters as you're going through Chaos. You don't want them to be dead cards in your hand. You know, you're not going to have them all removed. So it gives you a Dark Mist stance off of any card that Rin uses. So if you fall out of Dark Mist stance, you can very easily go back into it. It gives you a lot of flexibility. However, outside of Chaos runs, when you're using all of your save data that you've built together, if you're using Rin, you're probably using two supports who aren't going to break you out of Dark Mist stance all that much. So what this really does do is it gives you like a tiny bit of consistency of just any card giving her Dark Mist stance. Though to be totally fair, I think a lot of the times in some of your Rin teams you're running, not some of the times, excuse me, most of the times, you're running a bunch of card draw and a bunch of AP generation, and you're going to be using all of those first, and you'll probably find a card that just puts Rin in Dark Mist stance outside of Chaos anyway. So this one's going to be hit or miss for you. A lot of people will be like, this is the best one in the game. But if you break it down a little bit, you might not gain as much of a power benefit from it in comparison to what you thought you were going to get there with it. But it is still very strong, more so in Chaos than it is outside of Chaos though. The E6 here, listen, at the start of battle, gain Dark Mist stance. At the end of the turn, if you're in Dark Mist stance, gain 2 morale for 1 turn as well. This is just like basically a little bit of morale bonus. The start of the battle, gain Dark Mist stance, basically is kind of the same plus and minus that we just talked about with the E4. It's just another way for you to get into the stance quite easily. And we already went through why that might be a benefit or a drawback for you as a Rin player. It is still good, but is it worth using your very precious resource on at this point in time? Probably not, I would have to say. Now, then we have Orlia, who has actually two kind of big manifest egos, and this one I actually have, and it is Sleeping Memory. Now, Sleeping Memory adds Retain to Will of Light. Now, Will of Light is her card that activates all of the retain cards in your hand. And this is a pretty nice memory ego imprint, actually, because if you're using Orlia in these like slower retain teams a lot of the time, you're going to want to cast this card because this is going to activate all of your retain cards. The downside of a card like this is very similar to what we talked about with Khalipe and having absolute zero and having it be an activator for other people's cards in your deck. You might not draw it when you need it. You might not draw it at the correct time. It having retain, though, means you have all the time in the world to set up your perfect hand with a bunch of other retain cards, play the Will of Light that's been sitting there for a while because it has retain, and activate all of the other retain cards. You can have it sit there as you're slowly acquiring creations, proc those creations, proc whatever it is you want, and it still costs 2 and works very well with Celestial all at the same time as well. So very good for those reasons, because a lot of the time you'll see like an Orlia in a retain / Celestial team, and it having retain itself will help those teams consistency wise in a big way. Now, Orlia isn't anywhere near one of my favorite characters, and I think that if you're using her, you're probably using her in a retain team because that's kind of where she excels for the most part. If you're choosing to use her over another one of the, I don't know, super broken controllers in the game. So if you think that that might help you out and you want some consistency boost for your retain squad, go for it. It is pretty unique, and just like we talked about with Khalipe, it just adds you some extra consistency to the main game plan that you're trying to do with the 3 characters you've put together in a party. Now, the follow-up to that is Mei Lin. In Mei Lin, we don't have a lot to talk about for the most part. Now, Mei Lin, in my opinion, I think has some of the absolute worst manifest ego imprints in the game. A lot of these things are just like, do a little bit more damage. Dragon Flame awakens twice, always get a crit on Flame Dragon Sovereignty. A lot of the times though, none of this is really adding that much more damage to what a Mei Lin Ultra combo is going to be able to do. Whether you're using her with Veronica or without Veronica, whether you're using her inside or outside of Chaos, a lot of these things don't really play to like the biggest strengths that Mei Lin has for the most part. I don't think honestly any of them are worth it. The best one would be this one here that just allows Mei Lin's cards to grant embers to the target. If you have this one, you'll be able to stack ember up off of a couple of cards at this point in time, especially you're gonna have her upgrade jewel effect in play on top of the E2 memory awakening here. You'll be able to stack ember up like crazy. It's by far her best one. I just don't think that it's necessary. I don't think you need any of these manifest egos to make her a good character. You can leave her at E0 and do like 75,000 damage with your eyes closed, blindfolded anyway. So I would probably avoid Mei Lin when using your code as well. Now, Veronica manifest ego here, there's a couple of them that could be okay, but really it's this one, E2, that gives you a big benefit, a sort of gameplay change to Veronica. Now, this is anytime ally uses a targeting attack card, it's going to put this floral scent debuff on whoever they targeted. And what the floral scent debuff does is it increases the damage that that target takes from ballista shots. Only one enemy can have the floral scent debuff on it, so you're not going to be able to put it on a bunch of enemies and have all your ballistas just chain all over the place and do a bunch of bonus damage. But there's a reason for that, and it's because whoever has the floral scent debuff becomes the target for the ballista, which means you can utilize the damage of the ballistas in a consistent method where at the end of the turn you don't have to worry about, oh, that guy's at 1, that guy's at full, I want it to hit the guy at 1, not the guy at full, because I want to hit the guy who's got the giant axe emoji ready to hit my team for 5,000 damage. Oh wait, I died, Veronica didn't hit it. That problem now goes away due to the floral scent mark. Target that guy, Veronica's gonna say yes sir, and take that guy out. So as far as consistency goes, outside of Chaos, probably doesn't matter that much. Veronica's damage is pretty nice even outside of Chaos. Inside, well, but why doesn't that matter that much, I guess, is because most of the time she's in there generating cards, drawing cards, maybe even making some AP in conjunction with some of the other characters to facilitate whatever character, whether it be Mei Lin or Luke or whoever, to hit the monster for like 80,000 damage anyways. So outside of Chaos, doesn't matter that much. Inside of Chaos, all of those situations where it's like, I need that guy to die so I don't get KO'd, or I need that guy to go down so I don't get stress damage. Things like that. It's going to smooth out your gameplay experience. Is it a game breaker? I don't think so. You've probably survived all of this time without it, right? But on top of that though, Veronica is one of the best characters in the game. And so you'll probably be using her for a long time, meaning that if you decide that this is something that you want to pick up and use your code on, you could, and you'll get a long duration of power. I don't know. You'll get use out of it, basically, is what I'm saying here. You'll get a lot of use out of using the code on Veronica because she's just that good. When it comes to Renoa and Manifest Egos here, if you're a big Renoa main, just like with Rin, check it out. Hey man, you can get 20% damage bonus, but unlike Rin, this increases Lash Dis Assault by 20% every dirge bullet discard. It's not on the front part, it's on the bottom part. So 20% for every dirge bullet discarded. If you are in a chaining Renoa team, you discarded 10 bullets, that's 200% damage bonus, which is probably for the most part the cap that you'll get a lot of the times, unless you're on one of those turns where you discard a bunch of them, use her EP skill, bring them all back, and then discard them all again, and you can get maybe a 400% damage bonus on Last Ditch Assault. All that being said, it's a pretty awesome Manifest Ego for boosting your damage, as it boosts one of the main payoffs for her gameplay style by an incredibly significant amount, especially if you're able to get a couple of Last Ditch Assaults off throughout a turn by making multiple bullets or returning them to your hand or putting them in the graveyard and shuffling a bunch and redrawing them and using her EP skill. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and this buffing it is pretty cool. Now her E2 is for every 4 Dirge Bullet cards created, you'll create 1 Dirge Bullet Finale card, which is basically just like a slightly better Dirge Bullet, and it's a creation thing as well. So this is going to help you fulfill a couple of things. Number one, it's going to be doing more damage than a normal Dirge Bullet would. Number two, if you're trying to just get to that big, my hands full, I'm going to use a payoff card, and you make 8 Dirge Bullets, guess what? You're going to make 2 additional Dirge Bullet Finales. Now you're at the maximum, like 10 slot hand size, and you're good to go there. Do keep in mind though, this can be awkward if you're trying to do that, because you make 4 Dirge Bullets, it makes a 5th Dirge Bullet Finale, then you want to make 4 more, right? And that'll put you at 10, including the final finale card. So if you have one other card in your hand, usually a payoff card that you want to use, then you're going to overcap, right? You'll have 4 Dirge Bullets plus the first finale, then 4 more Dirge Bullets plus the extra card you have left in your hand, your payoff card. And when it goes to create the Dirge Bullet Finale card the second time, you're already at 10, buddy. You're already at 10. So look out for that one. But outside of that, it is pretty cool. It's a pretty nice damage bonus. It's just something that does bonus damage for free. And it 120% times 2 to a random enemy. Pretty nice. Do also keep in mind that all of her bullets do cost 1, unlike Luke's, and you can use her with the 1 cost set now. That was a bug that is fixed. You can give all of these Dirge Bullets in her Dirge Bullet payoffs like 35% crit damage bonus, just because everything is a 1 cost card. The rest of her stuff is pretty cool. 200% damage bonus on Blackthorn card. We don't really care about this. We're going from 500 to 700. The E6 is whenever a Dirge Bullet card is drawn, deal 50% damage to a random enemy. This one could be pretty cool if you're using her in like a Cassius team of some sort, paired up with like Ray or something, where you generate a bunch of Dirge Bullets, you dump them all into your graveyard somehow, maybe with one of her payoff cards, and then you use some way to generate more Dirge Bullets, and then you use Cassius's Shuffle to shuffle like a hand of like 9-10 cards into the graveyard. There's nothing left in your deck, so now you have like a bunch of bullets in the graveyard. You go to draw that many cards back, right? And you draw all your Dirge Bullets back, and the E6 procs and does 50% additional damage to a random enemy. The damage is low though, you're not casting anything, it's just free random additional damage. It's fine for an E6. It's cool. If you're a Renoa fan, you'll be able to do some cool stuff with it, but it's not like it's gonna take her to tier 0 and break the game or anything like that. We also have Hugo, Manifest Ego. The first one here is just buffing the damage of Commence the Hunt on Fixer's Approached It. It's okay. It's fine. I think a lot of people at this point in time have really sort of figured out that Hugo's not like overhyped, but he had a really high damage floor, but his damage ceiling isn't as crazy, and you don't really need something like this on him. Is it nice to get 10% extra damage on your E1? For sure. Is it a game breaker? Absolutely not. And that's really kind of where I'm going to go with all of his stuff. Is at this point in time, a lot of his stuff is basically in his builds and his teams. He's turned more into like a support DPS with a little bit of card draw than it really is a big DP. So even though some of these are pretty nice and they just kind of all generically increase his damage and stuff, none of them are really being like, oh man, it's a gameplay changer for Hugo. So I wouldn't really recommend using your code on any of his Manifest Egos, but y'all can go do whatever it is that y'all wanted. Now, when it comes to Yuki, I'm actually kind of mad about this character's Manifest Ego 1. It simply removes the damage decrease of her Iceberg Cleave. It did have like 20% reduction in some scenarios. This just removes it, so it's always gonna do the full damage there, regardless of how many enemies that you're hitting. And it just feels like a bad Manifest Ego. You can compare it to some of the other ones we talked about, like Rins, who's just like, do 20% more damage. This one's removing a drawback from one of the cards in your deck. Do you want to get it? Sure. Is it going to have a giant gameplay change for you as a Yuki main? Absolutely not. The E2 activates Inspiration for cards drawn at the start of the turn for 2 turns. Which is pretty interesting. So a lot of the times, Yuki, a good deck, won't really care about this too much. You're gonna have cards and ways to cycle and generate a bunch of self-sufficient card draws with her own 0, and you're not gonna care too much if you get stuck with one of her cards unusable in your hand at the start of a turn or at the start of battle. But for Chaos though, this is pretty nice. This is actually gonna make her quite a bit more usable in Chaos runs for you, because in those runs, like we talked about with some other characters, you don't have the consistent decks, the consistent save data that you've built up on your other 2 characters, your other 2 supports, or even Yuki herself. And one of the main ways you're going to be drawing cards in Chaos is, well, the first 5, the first 10 cards you draw in a battle within those first 2 turns, and her just being able to have inspiration on her stuff for free off those 5 cards is awesome, and it adds a ton of consistency to her inside of a Chaos run. And for that, if you're someone who wants that for Chaos runs exclusively, you want to spend your code on that, absolutely go for it. But the rest of these things, it's just more damage bonus. It doesn't really change anything crazy. This one does change Skyscraper's Cleave 50% damage to 80%. Like I'm saying, all of her stuff, most characters, just a small nominal change. This one does do that consistency thing, which makes it one of the better Manifest Egos if you're a Yuki enjoyer or a Yuki player, for you to pick up if you want to have more consistent Chaos manifestation runs. Chizuru's Manifest Egos, C1 here, check it out, 20% more damage to her main payoff card, Shadow of the Moon Plus. It also helps you heal a little bit more, 3% off your max HP. Same song and dance as all the other ones, nothing super crazy there. E2 does create a Shadow of the Moon when you use Shadow of the Moon Plus. Now, why would you want to do this? It's another consistency thing. It's another, in addition to that, like speed thing, right? So if you could create a Shadow of the Moon every time you make a Shadow of the Moon Plus, that's going to be less Will-O-Wisp stacks you need to stack up to get back to Shadow of the Moon Plus, right? Because you don't need to create another generic Shadow of the Moon, as your Manifest Ego E2 is doing it for you. So it allows you to get into some nice, like pretty self-sufficient Chizuru builds if that is your girl, that's your gameplay style, where you Shadow of the Moon Plus, boom, and you're ready to kind of rock and roll, hit it a couple more times, 10 more Will-O-Wisp, stack it back up, bind it back up to bind 3, have it turn back into Shadow of the Moon Plus again, and go from there. So it's a pretty decent one, but also at the end of the game, it's not really a game-breaking one. Speaking of game-breaking ones, though, we do have Haru. Now, Haru, we're just going to skip right over to the E2. Now, this changes Anchor Shot to be usable even if cost is insufficient. The Anchor Shot must be used through this effect and consume all remaining AP, and for each 1 AP spent less than the original cost, decrease damage amount by 40%. This is a lot to take in. Now, Haru is here. Her E1 is simply going to buff the damage amount that Lift Anchor gives from 70 to 100. I'm not the biggest fan of this one. And then her E2 is a big gameplay style change. Basically, it allows you to use Anchor Shot even if you don't have the 2 AP to cast Anchor Shot. And what it will do is it will consume all of your remaining AP, which means that you probably have 1 AP left if you don't have 2, right? And it's going to reduce the amount of damage that Anchor Shot does per missing AP you didn't have by 40%. This allows you to chain off a bunch of Anchor Shots over and over and over and over again. You can put them back into your hand with like a simple build like you can with the Anchor Pointer, where you can dupe this card a bunch, maybe get the Epiphany where it has a retrieve on it as well. You can Anchor Shot, you know, spend AP on it, Anchor Pointer, put it back into your hand, Anchor Shot again, put it back into your hand. You know, I have 1 AP left. I'm just going to use my final AP, right, to put like charge energy or use it on another support or just cast a 1 AP Anchor Shot. But you can just keep casting Anchor Shot over and over and over again as long as you have Anchor Pointer to put it back in your hand if you have her second Manifest Ego, which allows you to do some pretty big burst damage. Is this a necessary thing? Depends on what support you're pairing her with. There is a couple of big AP generating teams, specifically Nia and Veronica now, that allow you to generate 10, 12, 14 AP while cycling through the entirety of your deck. When they both have the new 0 mana Forbidden card that generates an AP and draws you a card every time it's drawn. You use that with Adagio and then draw them back out with other Nia cards and Veronica cards to just generate an absolute crap ton of AP, to the point where you might not need this thing because you can just fire off 7 full cost Anchor Shots, you know, with Rhythm Boost damage buffs and stuff on it. So maybe that's something that you might want to avoid if you want to use Haru in one of those big Veronica Nia. Outside of that, though, it is a very powerful Manifest Ego for just general use because it allows you to just chain Anchor Shot off, do free damage, do something with Haru that you couldn't do before. And E2 is a pretty big landmark, hallmark Manifest Ego in comparison to a lot of the other stuff we talk about when it's just damage bonuses. This is gameplay changing, so we like that there. Speaking of gameplay changing, this one here, if you're interested in Kayron, his E3, the Vivid Memory, where you add the Graveyard as a designated area that his EP skill can remove futilities from. Generically, it's usually just futilities out of your hand. This is futilities out of your graveyard, so you compare him with some other characters when you have this E3 that allow you to do really weird stuff with Kayron, like we talked about, very similar with like Renoa, right, where you can generate a bunch of her bullets and you can use like Cassius's Shuffle, dump them all into the graveyard, dump all the futilities in the graveyard, you know, dump 9 futilities in the graveyard, draw 9 cards with Shuffle, do more cool guy stuff, generate some more futilities in your hand, and then remove 15, 20 futilities from your hand in graveyard in combination, and just absolutely dumpster truck everything with a Ego skill off of Kayron, thanks to the ability for you to generate and remove futilities in your hand and in your graveyard because you are. I think that's really cool, and if you're a Kayron main, you just want to get more use out of them, you might have to build different teams around it, but I think it's a very cool Manifest Ego for you to pick up, and is definitely cooler than just I do more damage with some of my E1s and E2s that some of the other characters have. Now, the Omega codes are going to be fairly rare. I expect, and I think maybe they even kind of hinted at, that we'll probably be getting 1 per season. We're not going to get multiple per season, and a season's 9 weeks. So we should be getting one of these every 9 weeks, or, you know, just over 2 months. And what I would suggest for you to do, and maybe you caught onto it as we were going through all of the different manifest egos that you could use the Omega code on, the game's not hard. The game's not that bad, right? Use it on a character that you enjoy. And when you use it on that character, it expands your ability to have fun with that girl, right? If you're a Kayron main and you want to make Kayron stronger, you want to try what we just talked about with use my EP skill to remove stuff out of my hand in my graveyard futility wise, awesome. If you're a Haru player, you want to get that E2 and dump a bunch of stuff in there, that's going to be new for you, awesome. If you're a Luke main, you want to hit that E2, you want to hit that E6 and do a bunch of cool stuff with Luke, your favorite character, awesome. That is what I would aim it on. And also keep in mind, these are usable on future characters. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm kind of set and having fun with the characters I'm using in CZN, and I've been saving up all of my limited currency, all of my stuff. I didn't pull on Yuki, I didn't pull on Chizuru, and I'm just kind of personally waiting for that character whose gameplay looks super cool, whose playstyle looks super cool, and eventually I'll pull on that character, and probably if they have really cool manifest egos as well, use it on a future character, use it on someone I think deserves it. Who deserves it's going to be ultimately up to you, and hopefully this video helped you sort of realize it's fine to save it, it's fine to use it. You're not going to corrupt your account. Use it to increase how much fun you're having in the game with one of your favorite characters. Until then, God bless, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.